Welcome back, Dr. J. Marvin Herndon with us. Marvin, do you think this geoengineering that has created these horrible wildfires was originally the intent that they thought, oh, we're going to burn half of the state, let's do it?
No, I think the original intent was to learn to control the weather. I mean, the idea was sold to people, sold to the politicians, that, oh, well, we're going to compensate for global warming because, after all, particles cool the earth.
Big charade.
That's not true. They heat the upper atmosphere, which prevents some of the heat from being removed from the earth by convection. And that's so it's all totally backward. But I think that the military, for whatever reason, wanted to control the flow of moisture from the Pacific. You asked the question whether that's the original intent is to destroy California. I don't know that answer. I don't know who makes the decisions as to where to move the weather or where or when to do the aerial spraying.
Or is it an experiment? Are they saying to themselves, let's see what we can do, let's see how much havoc we can create in case we need to use it in warfare?
That could easily be, but my guess is that somewhere along the line, some deep state operatives are saying, let's create havoc in America and in Europe and in other Western civilized countries so that people will be forced to allow the UN to take control of the burning of fossil fuels and to be able to tax the fossil fuels. So I think there's these kind of motives at play, and then there's certainly vast sums of money to be made in can you imagine the contracts that are out for the aerial spraying? I mean, they're talking about annually maybe 10 to 12 million tons of coal fly ash being dumped in the air over our country, and the jets that do that, and both the military and their contractors, I mean, they're vast sums of money. I mean, everybody's in here for something, but nothing for the American people. And that is, I mean, people are being deceived. I mean, we're being poisoned. And the worst is these particles affect the very young and the very old. We're doing horrible things to our children. They're out playing in the street or in the yards while this stuff's being sprayed. They spray every day because the particles do not stay in the upper atmosphere. They mix with the air we breathe and come to Earth. And so you're being exposed to these poisons.
In 2008, somebody asked the government of China about the 2008 Olympics that they're going to host, the Summer Olympics. And they said, what about the weather? What if something happens and, the weather makes these games get canceled? And the answer was, don't worry about the weather. We can fix that.
Yes.
So even the Chinese have been doing it.
Everybody's been doing it. And the point is that nobody can do it without harming people and harming our planet. I mean, what's happening, the forests around the world are dying. We're seeing this in California. The Torrey pines, the rare Torrey pines in San Diego are dying. The evergreens up the coast are dying. The trees throughout Colorado are dying because the poisons the ground. The moisture that absorbs these chemicals from the coal fly ash lands on the leaves and becomes concentrated there, then drips down to the roots and poisons them. Birds are being killed. Insects are being killed. Quite literally destroying life on planet Earth. People have their the mainstream news every night and think nothing of what's going on in the air, and they're being deceived. Somebody should be telling them the truth.
Well, that's what we've got you here for, Marv.
Well, I was going to say that's why we have Coast to Coast.
We're not going to back down. Let's take some calls for you. They're lining up. Let's start with Sean in Fairfield, California, first-time caller for us. Hi, Sean. Welcome.
Hey, good evening, George. First off, I'm praying for everyone affected by the fires out here. It's been pretty terrible. I'm an Air Force pilot. I fly over California a lot. It's part of my job to know all the onboard systems, how they work, operate all the controls, and there's pretty much nothing that happens on my jet I'm not aware of. I inspect the aircraft outside and inside before every flight. My question for you guys is, controls like all the time, how would they be there without me knowing? And if they are, what exactly am I looking for internally to explain this to myself?
No, I'm not sure I heard all of the question. Look for
Could he, as a pilot, not know what was going on?
well, there are tanker jets that fly and distribute this material in large quantity. What also appears to be the case, I've seen, and in fact in the Wildfires paper, I show a couple of photographs of commercial jets that appear to be spraying. Now, I suspect, well, there was a video, a YouTube video done in Italy. And what the guy in Italy said, he worked at an airport, and he saw some exhaust pipes that didn't seem to belong where they should be. And what he came up with was the idea that they are in some of these commercial jets that are actuated automatically by pressure. And he believes that the people who maintain those are the people who maintain the toilet systems in planes, because nobody seems to bother with that part of the plane. That would be interesting to look into and document. I should mention that my website is nuclearplanet.com, and the reason I mention it is because we have, right in the first place, I have and just as you open the page, there's in red print, there's scientific and medical humanitarian publications. Click here. And if you click there, you'll be taken to a set of scientific articles that we've published, many of them co-authored with my physician friend. And these tell a pretty complete story of what's going on and how this is affecting the environment. I would welcome people to tell the truth and to make the observations and to blow the whistle on any activities that are going on. If you go to the California Wildfires paper, which is about the sixth one down on that page, you'll see some images. One image of a U.S. Air Force tanker jet spraying. Another image is one of a commercial airline that's spraying, and you'll see the markings.
They put what, tanks on those planes, right?
Well, on the commercial planes, they may have some tanks hidden somewhere. It's conceivable that they could mix something with the fuel as well. I don't know how they do that. I mean, you could have something mix with the fuel. The whole idea is to put particles into the air, because that's what keeps the raindrops from getting big enough to fall to earth. That's what it
James in Eureka, California, now west of the Rockies. James.
Yeah, I just want to mention something, then I have a question. But
Sure.
I live just maybe 100 miles from Mount Shasta, and Mount Shasta had a city council meeting with attendance, and it was all on chemtrails. Speaker Dane Wigington.
Yep, he's been on our show.
5 or 6 scientists, some of them had multiple degrees. And what they're finding is large amounts of aluminum.
And barium.
Is in the soil, in the lichens, in the water, and even in the snowpack on Mount Shasta. And the thing I wanted to mention also is that Coast to Coast has been covering this subject since about 1994.
Yep.
And I remember going to Ventura, California, and watching the chemtrails because I heard a show about it back in 1994. And another thing that these scientists are finding in the fallout from this spray, besides aluminum, is freeze-dried blood platelets.
That's interesting. I wonder what that would do.
Well, that's a good question. I think these blackouts programs are piggybacking other experiments on the same thing.
Good point.
They have film.
I think I would probably agree with you on that.
That show the spray equipment, and it's coming out of part of the wing where the engines are not. They have film footage of the tanks that are inside passenger planes, and then pilots testify that these planes are not on the regular frequencies. They don't use the squawk box like the passenger airlines. They're on some military frequency, and they don't even contact the tower.
It's even more so. Some of them do not have transponders turned on, so they do not show up on the control radar systems.
Nor would they ever know where the planes ended up.
Yes. Well, this is all of these things seem to be the case. I believe that the picture of the tanks inside of a plane. If we're thinking of the same thing, those tanks aren't really used for the spraying. They're used to make the critical adjustments for the design of balancing the aircraft. I've seen that. But other than that, everything that you're saying makes a lot of sense, and I know. In fact, when I first got interested in this, I went to Dane Wigington's website. Incidentally, on my website, there is a link to a page that has 74 links to websites of people, organizations that are protesting the aerial spray.
That's growing, isn't it?
And there's also a link to the website of Flickr. That if it pops up when you click on that link, you'll get thousands of pictures of chemtrails. And if you just get a search bar, then just put in the word chemtrails and hit it, and you'll get thousands of pictures that people have taken. This is big. It's all over. And it's doing terrible things to the planet.
Let's go back to James for his question now. Go ahead, James.
Can I mention one other thing?
Yeah.
The previous caller was asking, how can you tell these so-called abnormal contrails? Well, there's a number of ways. A normal jet contrail, and there was a pilot at the council meeting in Shasta that he teaches pilots at a military, one of the largest flight schools in the country. This is what he said. He said that a normal condensation trail will disappear right behind the plane. Well, these abnormal ones, they don't disappear. They'll persist, and then they'll spread out, and then there'll become a smeary haze. Well, that's one way to detect them. But other strange things that people are observing is you'll see the dash on, dash off, dash on, dash off, dash, and that's like a plugged nozzle. So if a normal jet was going through this on, off, there would be something wrong with the engine. That's another thing people are seeing. You know,
there's a picture of that in the wildfires paper I just mentioned.
Okay, cool. All right, let's move on to some other quick calls before the break, and then we'll wrap up with final calls. Jan in Brooklyn, New York's with us. Jan, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi, Jan.
You mentioned that with Wigington. He mentioned that the fires in California, they're doing fires in California, of the Middle East on purpose.
Wildfires.
We said you could look at the satellite pictures and actually see it being done.
Well, that's part of Marvin's theory that they were done on purpose. Go ahead, Marvin.
Well, let me say the setting the circumstances into place. I mean, fires in California are a natural occurrence, but what we've done is we've turned the state into a tinderbox. In other words, we've desiccated. There are many thousands of dead trees. There are many trees that are not healthy, that are
The sprays are fire propellants.
we're putting material in the air that can affect the electrical friction that results in maybe more lightning bolts to start fires. So I can't say that it's deliberate, although you never know. You don't know what these people will do. But it's been deliberate, making California desiccating California, preventing the moisture from coming in from the Pacific Ocean and raining normally in California.
Edward is in Austin, Texas. Hi, Edward. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, hi, George. In years past, I was one of your guests talking about Jesus in India, but now I'm calling about chemtrails.
Okay.
I'd like to mention a friend of mine who died in about 2007, Constance Clear of San Antonio, Texas. And Constance, I was told by Barbara Lamb, a crop circle researcher, another friend of mine.
And a good
Barbara
one.
told me that before Constance died, she showed a number of people in a hotel in New York City at a UFO conference folders and stacks of material about chemtrails. Constance Clear had been doing research and interviews with military people, pilots, all sorts of people about chemtrails. And Constance said that she would be coming out with a book about chemtrails, and she said it would be just a blockbuster. And she felt it would be a very exciting book. And what happened about 6 weeks later, Constance was dead.
Geez.
She died in a mysterious motorcycle accident in the mountains in Arizona. It was at night. And when her body was found, when she was found the next morning by someone who stopped at an overlook, and they looked down below, maybe about 400 feet below in a canyon, they could see a body. She lived, but she had severe injuries to her head and her body and so on. But what I'm getting at is the smoking gun is that after Barbara Lamb told me that Constance was writing that book, I called her son, and I won't say his name, but called her son in San Antonio, Texas, and I said, where would your mother's files and research about chemtrails be? He said, all of that is in her office, in her filing cabinet. And I said, can you check on it? I'd be interested in looking at it. And he called me the next morning, and he said, he couldn't believe it. I said, what's wrong? He said, her filing cabinet is empty.
Jeez, just like Tesla. Same thing. We'll be back.